George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
Either Donald Trump is being gravely misled or Donald Trump has gravely misled the world. This week in Riyadh, he took charge and responsibility for the fate of Ukraine and its president, Volodymyr Zelensky, whom he had earlier described as a dictator. Without even informing Moscow, he declared a one-sided 30-day ceasefire, knowing that Russia cannot possibly accept it. What could possibly go wrong? And the slaughter of Christians and Syrian national and ethnic minorities continues on the coast and around the country, even in the capital, Damascus itself, now teeming with USAID-sponsored journalists and assorted diplomats. It's all coming up here tonight on the mother of all talk shows. Stay tuned.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway. The mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway. The world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
Arms transfers and intelligence transfers, if they had ever been stopped, have been resumed. This was part of the deal that Donald Trump's emissaries in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, made with the emissary of Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. So the weapons are going to be flowing again, in full flow, you might say. The intelligence, perhaps even more important at this stage, has also been resumed. Elon Musk's satellites are presumably right now beaming this show to the people who put me on a Ukrainian death list. What can you say about that? Elon Musk has just suspended the No Conscription League Twitter feed before it had issued a single original tweet. I've asked him to explain why, but answer so far has there been none. The intelligence and arms resumptions were only part of the story. It was a double whammy. Marco Rubio announced in a press conference, without any reference to Russia at all, without a single telephone call on the newly restored hotlines to the Kremlin, that there was going to be a 30-day ceasefire and that Ukraine had accepted it. He must know that the Russians could not possibly accept such a unilateral ceasefire, not the least because the new flow of American weapons, the new flow of American intelligence, the declared exponential rise in flow of both weapons and intelligence from the European Union and the United Kingdom would mean that that 30 days would only be used, as Minsk I and II were used, to strengthen Ukraine and its armed forces for the next round of fighting, approximately 30 days later. Russia has stated right from the beginning that it is not interested in a ceasefire. It is interested in a deal that removes the causes of the war, which I have adumbrated here many times, but in shorthand, they are this: that Ukraine must be a completely neutral country. No Ukraine in NATO, no NATO in Ukraine, no NATO weapons, no NATO expertise, no NATO in camouflage, in mercenary form, nothing. Rien, zilch, absolutely neutral. That Ukraine must be demilitarized so that it cannot again be in a position to act as a proxy army for the NATO forces, reduced to something like 87,000 soldiers, from the million men that it had in arms at the beginning of this conflict. a denazification, that is to say, the end of the overweening influence of the Azov and other Nazi and neo-Nazi and fascist and ultra-nationalist formations that are the sinews of the war, the sinews of the Zelensky regime. No transfer of territory. The idea that these liberated areas full of ethnic Russians, Russian-speaking people, who with tears in their eyes right now are welcoming the Russian forces as they arrive, they will never return to rule by Kiev. They would never have left rule by Kiev if Minsk II had not been a simple deceit. In fact, other than Crimea, all of the Ukrainian territory, as was before the Russian invasion, would still and forever be in Ukraine. But Minsk II was a systematic deception in which the leaders of Germany and France and then the Security Council were completely complicit. They have admitted, Hollande and Merkel have admitted, that Minsk II was used to make Ukraine strong enough to confront Russia on NATO's behalf. This is not me saying this. This is them saying this. So the idea that Putin's going to agree to a Minsk III would appear entirely fanciful. As I say, either Donald Trump has been woefully misled by his advisors, or Donald Trump has been misleading the rest of us all along, including misleading the American people throughout his election campaign. You'll remember the pledge. 24 hours, he said, it would take him to bring about an end to the hostilities in Ukraine. And he would appear to have been lying. I'm sorry to say that, for I am one of those who had been misled. Now, there is a third possibility, and we shouldn't rule it out just yet, and of course we'll cover it on Sunday if it turns out to be a development. A third possibility is that this did not come as a surprise to the Russians, and that it comes with a bundle of other things of which we have as yet no knowledge. It could be because Moscow has not yet spoken, will not speak, until it receives official confirmation of what was agreed between the US and Zelensky's emissary in Riyadh when Donald Trump speaks with President Putin on Friday. So we have to hold back from a comprehensive denunciation of Donald Trump in this regard. But I have very little doubt that it is, in fact, a calculated deception. If I was in any doubt, the exact wording of the United States pronunciamento was replicated by every single NATO government. Right down to the tennis metaphor, the ball is now in Russia's court. It cannot be an accident that every single person that hates Russia in the European Power League tweeted exactly the same thing as the United States government tweeted. It cannot have escaped Donald Trump's notice unless he's really, really not paying attention that all these people hate him very much indeed. That all these people are planning to a greater or lesser extent to bring him down, to paralyze his second presidency in the way that they paralyzed his first. That they are constantly name-calling, blackguarding, libeling, defaming him, and that Ukraine itself isn't just urinating on his picture, isn't just defenestrating any and all Americana in their paraphernalia, including ripping off American patches from their sleeves, but that the NATO death cult, the NATO death squads, may very well have been involved in at least the second of the attempts on his life, which came so very close to success. A bullet penetrating his face, his ear, luckily. This man that we know nothing about that penetrated Trump's ear may or may not turn out to have links with Ukraine. But the man who tried to kill him on the golf course in Florida was actually a frequent visitor to Kiev and a frequent collaborator with the most extreme Ukrainian elements, and was recruiting mercenaries to go and fight in Ukraine. That much we do know about the second of the assassins who set about killing President Donald Trump. So how comfortable Trump feels in the company of Macron and Starmer and little soldier Schultz and Anna Baerbock and all the other traducers of his presidency and character, I'm not sure. How comfortable he now feels hugging little Zelensky, who so gratuitously insulted him and the Vice President J.D. Vance in the Oval Office itself, I've really no idea. So there are three possibilities. Either Trump is being fooled, or Trump fooled us, or something's going to happen on Friday in the telephone call between Trump and Putin, of which we can only speculate. And no doubt in the course of this show, particularly with the interview with the one and only Scott Ritter towards the end of the show, about which more later, maybe Scott Ritter will be able to enlighten us on what alternative possibility there might be. But if we take it at face value, Trump has now, having been the candidate who was going to halt the war in 24 hours, the president who may have to preside over the continuation of the war until every last inch of the Ukrainian state is conquered by the Russian forces, which is beginning to happen. The withdrawal, as Zelensky says, in fact, a rout of the 10 scores of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers trapped in the Kursk bulge, is already well underway. A huge uptick in the number of people surrendering and stragglers making their own way by foot, if necessary, out of Kursk and back into the internationally recognized Ukrainian frontiers. This was supposed to be Zelensky's prime card. Now he doesn't hold any cards, literally, as Donald Trump himself said. The incremental, day by day, hour by hour advances of the Russian forces right across the line of contact will not stop before the river Dnieper. The Dnieper is the obvious partition point of the Russian and Ukraine spheres that will be left at the end of this war. Russia will not stop fighting until that is achieved. It will not stop fighting until Odessa, the archetypal Russian city, is liberated in the south, and Kharkov, another archetypal Russian city, is liberated in the north. So anyone who thinks that Putin, having sacrificed so much blood and treasure of his own people, is going to accept a ceasefire dictated by the person who's losing the war, and who's losing it bigly, as Donald Trump would say, has no appreciation of Vladimir Putin's skills as a negotiator at all. Putin is not anybody's pushover, but I can assure you, from my own personal and certain knowledge, that there are many people in Russia who believe that Putin has been far too soft on the Kiev regime, that some things that are being done now, inexplicably, weren't done 2 years ago. The mercenary hotels that are now regularly being exploded could have been exploded at any time. The docks in Odessa, destroyed this week, could have been destroyed 2 years ago. The way in which Putin has prosecuted the war is severely criticized by many military personnel on the front line who cannot understand why this softly catchy monkey approach is being taken. So there's no possibility for both of those reasons. Putin's skills and the pressure on Putin from people who want to fight this war to its conclusion, never mind any ceasefires or deals, mean that Trump is likely to be disappointed on Friday in the telephone call. But what happens then? That means Donald Trump now owns the Ukraine war. When he had a possibility to pivot away from it entirely, to end the arms sales, to end the intelligence sharing, to simply walk away after the behavior of Zelensky in the Oval Office, he's now lost. He now holds the entire future of this war in his hands. And the defeat of Ukraine will now be his defeat also. It's hardly making America great again. It's hardly putting America first. And it's very difficult at this distance to know why on earth he has done this. The other subject we'll be dealing with this evening is the onslaught, the pogrom, the massacre, the attempted genocide of the minority populations in Syria. The Jolani head-chopping, heart-eating, coat-thrutting, throat-cutting elements in the West and in Syria itself have spent most of this week trying to deny that which we have seen with our own eyes. And we saw it with our own eyes through the lens of the people who were carrying out the genocidal acts. It's like that great Groucho Marx gag of when his wife came in to the bedroom and found him in bed with his secretary. Naturally enough, she went bananas. And he leapt out of bed and he said, "Nothing happened, nothing happened. Who are you going to believe, me or the evidence of your own eyes?" Well, who are you going to believe about Syria? The evidence of your own eyes, I would have hoped, which were given. That evidence was given by the killers, the mass murderers themselves. Daily, hourly, we watch videos as horrific, every bit as horrific as the Israeli genocide in Gaza was to the consciousness. Some of them claim that they are old videos. Maybe some of them are, but I'm really not sure what point that makes. The old videos were carried out by the same people who are carrying out the same kind of atrocity today. It was Al-Qaeda and ISIS, rebranded as HTS, and now the so-called government of Syria that committed all these crimes over the last 13 years, that carried out all the head choppings, crucifixions, throat cuttings, mass murder of people for no other reason that they did not fit the tiny, narrow, takfiri, fanatic Islamist politics of the HTS, as it now is called. Now, this means that mainstream Sunnis, who are the majority in Syria, the Arab Sunni population of Syria is some 56% of the population. The Kurdish Sunnis have to be added to that if we're talking in sectarian confessional terms. And the idea that this is something that is about Assad remnants is for the birds. Anybody who believes that will believe Netanyahu when he claims he's only killing Hamas in Gaza. You know that that is false. You know that the media who told you that were lying to you. So why would you believe them when they tell you, as so many of them do, including the now infamous Al Jazeera, which tells you that these killings were of Assad remnants, when you saw the people being killed, because the killers videoed it and put their video out on air. Why would you believe that? You know that they lied to you on so many things. most recently on Gaza. Why would you believe them now? So, if you're a Sunni who doesn't share the takfiri mentality of these cutthroats, then you will be killed, as a respected Sunni sheikh in Idlib, from Idlib, was murdered just a day or two ago. You know their attitude to the Christians in Syria. Christians to Beirut, Alawites to the grave. That's their slogan. Now, the Alawites are a substantial population. Unfortunately, the Christian population has, for the most part, if it could get there, flown to Beirut, knowing that if they did not, their persons would suffer the same persecution and destruction as their religious buildings, churches, seminaries, convents, and so on have already suffered. The Alawites on the coast are now sheltering in their thousands in the Russian air base that lies between Latakia and Tartus. That Russian air base may turn out to be very important, because one of the items on the agenda on the phone call between Trump and Putin tomorrow is how the two men, the two countries, can act for a change together to come to the rescue of the people being slaughtered by the people that the West put into power in Syria in the first place. It's all going to be dealt with by Syrian Girl, our first guest, right after this. Stay tuned.
A new dawn has broken, has it not?
He had that Clinton thing. His eyes were round and big and smiley, and he was very charming.
He became this incredible pop idol kind of prime minister.
I think most people who have dealt with me think I'm a pretty straight sort of guy, and I am.
New Labour was backed by the most powerful media interests because they realised he was representing them.
He was caught red-handed trading policy in return for hard cash from a businessman.
America has no truer friend than Great Britain.
Both Bush as well as Tony Blair are now wanting to plunge the world into a holocaust.
JP Morgan paid him off for the Iraq war. The man is a war criminal.
Is Tony Blair a war criminal? In my opinion, yes.
Most definitely.
The pursuit of money has become the dominant theme in your life.
All these relationships are, in most people's estimation, corrupt relationships.
No previous Labour Prime Minister has behaved in this shameful, money-grubbing way.
How do you sleep at night? You know, it's that. It's as a person.
Here's the poll for this evening. Is the West responsible for HTS murders of Syria's Christians? Answer yes or no. On my Telegram channel, t.me/George Galloway. On my X account, if it's still there. On the YouTube community poll and on the YouTube stream. If you're watching on the YouTube stream, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and give a thumbs up to the program, because that will help us in the ceaseless struggle against Mr. Algorithm. If you want to call the show, it's toll-free in the US and Canada. In the US and Canada, the number is +1 844 944 3344. In the UK and Ireland, it's free of charge on 0808 196 5522. And the worldwide number is 0044 203 966 2625. Well, I gave her the billing. She is the indefatigable Syrian Girl. Let's hear from her. Very nice to see you again, ma'am, and I'm sorry for the suffering in your country. If it's painful for me to watch, it must be even more painful for you to watch, not least because there's a large-scale attempt to smear you and me and everyone who stands up against these fanatics, and all kinds of lies are told about us. So perhaps you could respond to that first. How accurate is the reporting of people like you, like me, like Kevork, Almasian, and others? Who should we believe in this story?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, George, for having a very, taking a moral and strong stance about this from the start. I mean, we all predicted this would happen. We warned this would happen. They called us everything under the book. They called us Assadists or Islam haters or Sunni haters. Right off the bat, I want to say that I am of the Sunni class of Syrian society. And this is not the Syria that I grew up in. And now we've got basically a bunch of Central Asian, mainly, and Chechen, and also a Gulf Arab people who have decided to join Al-Qaeda that are coming in, and they've essentially become like another type of Zionism. They believe that Syrian land belongs to them, and anyone that doesn't agree with their version of Wahhabi Islam is going to be genocided. Now, about the reporting, of course, they've been attacking us, claiming that there's no such genocide. The videos were released by the terrorists themselves, okay? They're making people bark like dogs in the street before shooting them. They're beating up old men. They're going into people's houses and they're killing civilians. The list of names of people that have been killed have already been released, and amongst them are women and children. Now, there's an argument that, they were killed in the crossfire and all of this. Well, there's videos of them going into the people's houses. They're not old. They're there. And they're stealing as well. There's also photographs coming out of them stealing fridges, televisions, everything under the sun. So their behavior has been very much like Israel. And while we hear in the Western side of the news, they're going after Assad remnants or Assadists or whatever. But in reality, if you listen to the fighters that are killing the Alawite and Christian and any Sunnis that help them, minorities, they themselves tell you they want to drive them into the sea. They want to commit ethnic cleansing. Like they don't, they call them the Nusayris. They don't hide their intent. The genocidal statements that have come out in video format from these very people, it cannot be denied. And that is also another feature that makes them similar to the Israelis. And now they're stripping men before they shoot them. Very Israeli as well. So I don't know what, I guess people want to minimize what happened, but there's no minimizing it. It's very obvious that at the very minimum, war crimes are being committed, and that genocidal intent has been stated. They claim that the state, the Jolani's government, weren't involved in this somehow, and they're gonna crack down on these individuals. He's the one that sent an armada of forces into the East Coast. And even whilst the massacres continue as we speak, he hasn't called for them to pull back. And it's interesting that when Israel was invading, not a single shot was fired. But now, when it's Syrians, then an armada of genocidal terrorists go house to house and shoot at people. So what actually happened was, when October 7th began, the media decided to basically forget all history and just focus on that one incident. But what's been happening in the coast is very similar incidents have been happening for the last 2 months, and they have been underreported in the media, and people had enough. And as a result of that, a particular former general made a statement online saying that we're going to pick up arms and we are doing this for the unity of Syria because we don't want to live under an Al-Qaeda government, essentially. And as a result of that, the Armada was sent, and they couldn't find the people that posted that statement. They couldn't find the former military general, so they just started shooting everyone, basically. And Syrian society is simply not going to accept this. There's been protests in Damascus, there's been protests in Aleppo, there's been protests in Qamishli, but in Damascus and in Aleppo, they've been suppressed by the Jolani regime, and also Jolanists in the street who have acted as a counter gang. So there's a lot to talk about, but essentially that's so far what's been happening.
Well, it is a possibility. I mean, let's not 100% discount it, that Jolani is the Dr. Frankenstein who built a monster of jihadists from all over the world, Tajik, Uzbeks, Uyghurs, Algerians, Gulfies, brought them from all over the world, made them into a jihadist army, and now that he doesn't want them to be killing people and filming themselves doing it, because it's bad for his business. After all, he's going to Brussels to pick up a very large check from the EU, having already picked up a very large check, £50 million from the British government. It's bad for business. But the elements that he made into the monster that took power in Damascus no longer listens to him. So, I mean, it's one or the other, isn't it? Either he's behind these massacres or he's unable to control them and therefore isn't the president of Syria at all.
He is not the president. Nobody voted for this guy. He founded Al-Qaeda in Syria. He was on video encouraging people to commit suicide attacks and photographed with child soldiers only a few years ago, like a couple of years ago. So, it's funny to think how he drove people to commit suicide for his cause, and now he's in a Hugo Boss suit with a $70,000 watch in his hand. And I'm sure that people are going to be disgruntled by that. But the reality is that he would have wanted to pretend that everything was fine until the sanctions were lifted and he got, the financial incentives. And then when the world was no longer paying attention, these pogroms would happen. But it's interesting to note that the UK actually lifted sanctions after the massacres already began, which I believe was on the 11th of this month. So the notion is, though, I would like to get to this. The fact is that everybody involved had no illusions about who these people are. Like, if Jolani is the founder of Al-Qaeda and he's supposedly the best of them, you can kind of imagine the kind of insanity of these people that are committing these massacres. And those are the people that won the freedom of Syria. This is the free Syria that we were promised. And when I say that they know who he is, the US did have a $10 million bounty on his head, which was now lifted. But they needed a man like this in power because Israel's agenda is to balkanize Syria. And we had a country where all of the, unlike, for example, in close by nations where some of the minorities have been seduced by Israel, Syria has a country where everybody was on board with being anti-Zionist and that the Zionists are the enemy. But here we have Jolani alienating the minorities in order to drive them into the arms of the West and of the Zionists and to balkanize Syria. This is the yinonplan. This is the David Corridor plan. And it's not a coincidence that Israel was backing Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra Front, which changed its name to HTS, from the start. They, gave them 12 rebel groups. They admitted to giving 12 rebel groups weapons. They gave them medical aid. And Al-Qaeda actually, one of the spokespeople for Al-Qaeda in Syria actually thanked Israel once for the airstrikes that it was doing. This was about in 2018. So even Netanyahu came out and congratulated the Syrian people for acquiring freedom while he was bombing all of Syria's what's left of their military arsenal, and he went on record to say, I did this, like I am responsible for what's happening in Syria because I weakened the Axis. And now, as very predictably, the Israelis have flipped the switch and they're claiming to be the protectors of the minorities. And it's funny to see some of the people from the pro-Jolani gang who were, thanking Israel. And even as recently as, last month when Israel assassinated Sayyid Nasrallah in Lebanon, they were holding up posters thanking Netanyahu. And now they're thinking, oh, well, the Israelis are trying to get onto the new mistress and they've forgotten the old one. So one of the things I wanted to get across, there's already people that were saying maybe the solution is to Balkanize Syria in order to protect these people. But you have to understand that Christians are not actually localized in the coast. They're actually scattered all over the country. And even though there's a large Alawite population in the coast, that doesn't mean there's also no Alawites in the main cities. So by claiming that dividing Syria is going to solve the problem, essentially what that means is to have a population transfer or ethnic cleansing. And some of the oldest churches in the world are in Damascus, if not the oldest church. So there's not gonna. It's like why is it okay to leave the rest of the country with the founder of Al Qaeda as the president? He has to. It has to be a solution that protects everybody, and Balkanization is only serving Israel's interests.
Yeah, but you can understand that when the Russian air base is now a refugee camp, when the country is already Balkanized, I mean, sorry to put it so bluntly, but the country has been Balkanized for a very long time, for more than a decade. You have Kurdish armed enclaves, you had ISIS and Al-Qaeda armed enclaves. Now you have a very substantial Israeli enclave, 3 whole provinces they are thinking to declare as annexed. You can understand why people's mind turns to, well, at least we have to protect the minorities who are completely defenseless.
And it's completely understandable. But what I want to get across to people is that making one piece of Syria a protectorate isn't going to solve the issue, because there's minorities all over Syria. And what about them? Like, what about us? What about, for example, me as a Sunni from Damascus? Is it so that we have to live under this? I mean, this is the 21st century, and the West has decided that they're going to impose the founder of Al-Qaeda in Syria as a president on the Syrian people. So all I'm putting forward is, yeah, it's completely understandable why people want to find a solution to the massacres and the pogroms that are happening, but I don't think this is going to solve it. It's not enough. And the Turkish invasion was happening actually at the same time. We don't even, we forget about them. We have the Americans, we have the Israelis, we have the Turks. So this is I don't know, I don't want to use the word for it, but it's a web of problems, essentially. And the people who are putting forward the solutions, of course, are going to be the Israelis, and they can't be trusted.
Of course not.
And besides
Syrian Girl, thanks for joining us. Yeah, go on.
Thank you so much. Just quickly, they want to make Syria a landlocked country because they want to starve the rest of the country out. And I just wanted to point out that Jolani met with Alistair Campbell and Rory Stewart from MI6, and they took a very nice photo. And so the UK government, unfortunately, is completely complicit with the genocide. And WikiLeaks, of course, Hillary Clinton, she said herself, Al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria. So they know what they were doing from the start. And we knew as well that this would happen. So thank you so much, George.
I think you're welcome. I think the photograph that you mentioned of Campbell and Stewart with Golani will not age well for them. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Is the West responsible for HTS murders of Syria's Christians? Yes or no? You can vote on Telegram, on X, on the YouTube community poll, or on the YouTube stream. Let's take a quick break. Then it's your calls all the way to the hour. Stay tuned. Even though it has moved its mass murder campaign from Gaza, although there's still mass murdering in Gaza, of course, no day off for the poor refugees in the concentration camp of Gaza, but they have moved their killing fields to Lebanon. Lebanon, a sovereign country. Lebanon, a member of the United Nations. Lebanon, a country to which every other country in the world has diplomatic relations, has ambassadors in place, is being remorselessly bombed with hundreds and hundreds of air attacks, killing hundreds and hundreds of people every day, most of them women and children. Was it ever thus? As I said the other night, put the letter H in front of any Arab child and you can slaughter them with impunity. Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah, they all look the same. They all are deserving of death, violent, sudden death, delivered from American airplanes, using American missiles and bombs, with British airplanes supplying the targeting information and the offending American and British reconnaissance flights flying out of somebody else's country, namely Cyprus, and the British sovereign base there.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Is the West responsible for HTS murders of Syria's Christians? Yes or no? Get voting on our poll. Now, just take note of this. Because Scott Ritter is not allowed by YouTube to appear on our show, I know, right? You must, when I come to the interview with him, which will be at about a quarter to the second hour, you must retune to one of the other channels on which we're broadcasting, which is either watch on MOATS.tv, our new website, or on X itself, or on Rumble, or any of the other platforms. In other words, if you're watching on YouTube, you will have to retune to see what will be a very important interview, I think, between me and Scott Ritter, just towards the end of the show. Let's take the first call of the evening. It's from the legend that is Sarkar in Glasgow on Syria. Sarkar, welcome. What do you want to say?
Sarkar, sorry, George. Honestly, I don't know what to say. I'm telling you honestly. Think of it this way and help me solve this riddle if you think I'm talking like a stupid guy. We, the West, armed, trained, made this guy, the Jelani guy, the HTS group, very powerful, so they can supposedly take care of Syria. They kicked Assad out because according to them, Assad was not good enough, so the West said that HTS can take care of Syria. Now, herein lies the catch. Israel has been bombing Syria, destroying all of Assad's military. Today morning, one of Israel's top-notch ministers, not some riff-raff from Knesset, not some rank and file from Knesset, top-notch minister said, we can take care and control a northern part of Syria for unprecedented time. Help me solve this riddle. HTS is now in charge of Syria.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Sorry,
there is no way to solve that riddle. It is riddled with such contradictions. If we, the West, were supporting HTS, which we indisputably were, why are we not telling Israel to stop bombing them? Why have we not told Israel to stop occupying more and more of their land? If the countries of the West now are forced to take action to defend Christians and other minorities in Syria, they will be doing so against the people that we put in power just a couple of months ago. And thirdly, what does the American public think about their country having been absolutely instrumental in putting in power in a Mediterranean country the people who flew the airplanes into the Twin Towers on 9/11? The people that we were told the West were fighting a veritable crusade against for 20 years. The people who were cutting the throats of hostages, aid workers, Western journalists, clerics, people of all kind. You remember these barbarous executions? They took place on television. An HTS, ISIS, Al-Qaeda guy would give a long talk, pointing his dagger at the camera, and then go behind a helpless captive and literally cut his head off. How can Western politicians get away with giving money and weapons, sharper knives, to these people? How? Well, the only answer can be that the ability of the snake stream media to force entire populations to turn on a sixpence is completely undiminished. And I'm afraid I'm beginning to think that's true. Thank you, Sarkar. Now you can leave comments on the YouTube by scanning the QR code on the corner of the screen now. Snowman 227 says the West is so silent about this whilst being so vocal about every tiny little thing that happened under Assad. And Z.A. Lugazaid says most of the Syrian civilians were killed by foreign mercenaries, Chechens and Uyghurs, not Syrians. Wasim Gorani sends us 200 Canadian dollars. Thank you very much, Wasim, who says, don't trust Al Jazeera on anything, especially Palestine, as their reporting is all doom and gloom to set it up as a lost cause. They are leading you to normalization between their owner, Qatar, and Israel. Then it will be all pro-Israel, like other state-owned agencies in the UAE and Saudi Arabia. And the Whisperer says, George, leave Algerians away from this mess. This is the second time you've mentioned Algerians. They are thousands of miles away from this. Well, I'm sorry, Whisperer, but they are not. I know an Algerian accent when I hear one. And I heard one of these fanatic head choppers speaking to the media from Algeria. Of course, the mass of Algerian people, the heroes of the Great Revolution, the land of 2 million martyrs, are not in any way responsible for this. But the kind of people who rose up the so-called feasts, the Islamic Salvation Front in Algeria in the 1990s, they are very much the kind of people that are in Jolani's Al-Qaeda and ISIS army. I'm sorry, that's an uncomfortable truth, but it happens to be the truth. Damien in Brighton on the ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine that so far is a one-sided ceasefire. Damien, what would you like to say?
Good evening, George. Yes, I'd like to make two brief points about this, if I may. My first is this. Imagine you were playing chess and you were just about to checkmate your opponent, and they said, hold on, can we pause this game for 30 days? That would obviously be an absurd request. Or if we took a football analogy, imagine your team was winning a match 8-0 and there were 5 minutes left, and the captain of the losing team asked for the game to be paused for 30 days. Your response and the response of your listeners and viewers would probably be the same as mine, which would be, I would laugh in their face and tell them to either finish the match or concede defeat. And I think the same principle applies to the war in Ukraine. War is a very serious issue because it's a matter of life and death. And so this is no time for Trump and Zelensky to play games. Zelensky's requested a 30-day ceasefire, which is effectively an admission of defeat. So it is illogical for him to ask the winning side to agree to a temporary ceasefire rather than a permanent one. Another important factor to consider is that Trump and Zelensky have both proven themselves to be untrustworthy and bad faith actors, which undermines the credibility of their proposal. So, for example, Zelensky reneged on the peace agreement in April 2022, and since announcing this latest ceasefire proposal, he fired 300 drones at Moscow, and Donald Trump has not honoured the Gaza ceasefire agreement. So they have a record of failing to honour agreements, and that suggests that this one isn't worth the paper it's written on and is just propaganda. My second point, and I'll be very brief, George, is that the British public is being subjected to so much doublethink propaganda by Keir Starmer and the EU leaders that it feels as if we're living in George Orwell's 1984. We are being told that Russia is too weak to defeat Ukraine, whilst we are also being told that Russia is so strong that its army could roll across Europe at any time, and we have to pay £800 billion extra for our defence. Now, those assertions.
Well, you said
clearly...
you said it all, Damien. There's no need to go on, and there's no need for me to add to it. These ridiculous contradictions riddle the entire thing. A boxer that's on the ropes and whose legs are giving way beneath them is not able to ask for a 30-day suspension of the beating that he's taking. As you put it brilliantly, he has either to concede the match or to allow it to proceed to its inevitable conclusion. And that metaphor, though as you rightly say, war is a much more serious business than that, must govern this situation. But here's the rub, Damien. Trump must know that that's what the Russians will be saying right now in the Kremlin. So I just leave open the slight possibility that something will come out of Friday which will make this picture look different. But overwhelmingly, I think the analysis you've made cannot possibly be contradicted. Thanks for making it. Now, a big thanks to this week's top donors who visited the new MOATS.tv website. Joseph Myers, Thomas Kuznick, Wendy Tsien, Hugo Sicek, and Catherine Woodward. Thank you very much, every one of you. And everybody else who's given. Even £1, €1, $1, we're worth it. And it's easy to do. You just go to our website and click, and you can give on a recurring basis, or you can give as a one-off. And you'll also on the website be able to watch the interview with Scott Ritter. So if you've not visited the website yet, this would be a good time to do it and watch the Scott Ritter interview on it. Let's stay in England, where Ashraf in Poole wants to talk about Trump. Go ahead, Ashraf.
Good evening, George. Thank you very much for allowing me to come on your show again. I was once before. I have a personal view about the fate of Trump, which I would like to hear your comments on. So if you'll allow me, I have two premises leading to a conclusion. First, as we know, Trump expressed his wish to take Greenland and Gaza. It seems that he is playing the old monopoly, where you take this land and that land, which is, of course, contrary to international law. The second premise is that on the internal front, he has angered and alienated many factions of people and organizations inside the USA. Now, what is my conclusion from that? I think, George, that sooner or later, there are many powers inside the USA that are planning to put together a bulletproof case to impeach him. When that happens, he will be handed the go-to-jail cards of the monopoly. Don't pass go, don't collect that. What do you feel about that, George?
No, I don't think so at all. I don't think he's in any danger of going to jail. Neither do I think that the weak and divided, emaciated Democrats are in any position to impeach him. So I reject that premise. If that's what you're resting on, that premise I think is a non-starter. And I think we should stop talking about international laws. I really do. I'm sick hearing about it. When Netanyahu can visit anywhere he likes with outstanding ICC arrest warrants against him, while the former president of the Philippines, Duterte, gets arrested on arrival from China in Manila and within hours is on an airplane to The Hague to stand trial, I don't want to hear about international law anymore. Thirdly, Trump is getting his way. The elections that were held in Greenland yesterday have returned a landslide victory for the pro-independence factions. The pro-independence from Denmark faction is now the ruling party in Greenland. You know what happens next? Trump bribes them into becoming part of the United States. He's already triumphed in Panama, where BlackRock now owns the canal, a canal that he claimed falsely was owned by China, which it never was, but now it's owned by BlackRock. And they are, of course, big friends of Donald Trump's administration and, of course, are an American multinational corporation. So there's Panama with Greenland to come. Whether Canada will be quite the same pushover, well, that remains to be seen. On Gaza, I've often said this to people. Watch what Trump does, not what Trump says, because he's capable of saying completely contradictory things in the same statement. And today he said, and I'm quoting him, nobody's going to expel anybody from Gaza, which is the complete opposite of the statement that he has made over and over and over again, that everyone will have to be expelled from Gaza and go to somewhere nice, like Egypt in the desert, or in the Jordanian desert, between Jordan and Iraq, for example. He said it so many times, I couldn't count them. But today he said, nobody's going to expel anybody from Gaza. Which brings me to the current proposal. It is possible, I'm going to put it at 5%, that some surprise is in the offing. Moscow has not commented upon the apparently insane suggestion emerging out of Riyadh for a unilateral ceasefire by one party to the war. But 95%, it looks to me that Donald Trump has just taken ownership of the Ukraine war. What could possibly go wrong, as I say? Let's take Jasmine in London on Syria before the break. Jasmine, welcome. What do you want to say?
Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you. What would you like to say, ma'am?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for, because you are interested about Syrian and about the minorities in Syria. Actually, I am one of the people, I am Alawis, I have to be honest with you, I am Alawis. So I just wanted to speak a little bit about the situation in Syria, which the whole media is silent. Yeah. And I have all the proof of videos, pictures, or everything. They are killing people. Today there was a massacre, another massacre today. And like they are killing people in every, like you can't even walk. I am from Ramallah and I can send you the link for that. The bodies in everywhere. Like they didn't allow even the mothers to bury their kids or bury their anyone dead from them. They said, you have to suffer. Is this your kids? So kill them. So they are coming in groups. They're hiding their faces, but they are filming that, and they are very proud. What are they doing? And they say they are Muslim people. So why are you killing people in Ramadan? That's what I want to understand. First of all, they poison the water. Then they start their extreme attack at Alawis with no reason. They said, oh, they are a remnant of the old regime. Can you tell me, is kid with 2 months, his remnant of, what's your problem with mother or with kid? Or sorry, my English is not perfect, but what I'm going to think is like genocide is something very bad. What they do it in 3-4 days, it was more than what they did, what Israel did in Gaza, because we saw everything. I lost my family. I'm not sure if they are alive or not. The last thing I know, like my sisters, they were hiding in the forest. That's everything I know about my family.
Your language is not perfect, but your heart was, and the pain that you and so many millions of Syrians are feeling right now. Don't forget, 2 of my sons are half Syrian. So I feel that pain also. It's a pain that aches and breaks the heart, and you have reflected that in your call this evening. I pray for the safety of your family. I know that in the forests there are many who are in absolute terror, not just of death, but of the most horrific death at the hands of the most horrific killers that we have ever seen in modern times. Thank you, Jasmine. Is the West responsible for the HTS murders of Syria's Christians? Well, 20,000 people nearly have voted, and I'm afraid it's overwhelmingly a yes. 97, 91, 91, 93. You can still vote for another 40 minutes. Now, coming up in the next hour is that interview that I told you about with the one and only Scott Ritter on the Ukraine-Russia situation. You won't want to miss that, I promise you. He is, without doubt, the clearest and most analytical brain on military, geopolitical matters out there in social media today. That's why you never see him on Snake Stream Media. But if you're watching on YouTube, you'll have to turn over when I throw to the interview with Scott Ritter, because inexplicably, YouTube have told us that if we feature Scott Ritter as a guest, they will take the entire show off the air. Don't ask me why, don't ask me the logic of that, but they've told us that, and in writing. So you'll have to go to the website, MOATS.tv, and go to the watch page. It's a good opportunity to see the new website. Or you can, of course, watch on X and on Rumble and so on. So let me take a quick break, and then one call right after the break from Bobby in London on Syria. Stay tuned, you don't want to miss it. I don't believe that the mainland European countries give a toss about Britain, and I'm certain that the United States would not sacrifice itself for Britain. That's why I say Britain is completely marginalized. As for the Trident missiles, of course, if the United States, which has dual control over these missiles, gave permission for them to be launched, of course, they would incinerate Russian cities. But what good would that do us? Because we'd all be dead, including the people that fired the missiles. You feel me?
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Let's go to Bobby in London on Syria. It is the global university of the airwaves, after all. Bobby, what do you want to say, sir?
Hello, George. What it is basically is what's happening in Syria at the moment is horrendous. We all know that. Women and children, innocent people are getting killed. We know that. Now, regarding what's happened recently, I think over 1,000 people, some say 5,000 people have died, innocent people. Now, you're missing context in that information because what happened is, I got this from few sources of mine, but what happened is basically the militia from Assad or Assad groups or friends or whatever it was started to fire at the HTS people. Now, the HTS, yeah, sure, they are bad people. I do understand that. They're Wahhabism. We don't support that, you know. I know that. But the thing is, you're missing context in that. That's what happened. So they went in there, and then the Syrians started to shoot them up, and then obviously it kicked off. You're missing that. They didn't just go in there and start dragging people out of the room, cutting their heads off, chopping their balls off, whatever you want to, you know, that's not happening. Yeah. If you look at Idlib is quite a peaceful place at the moment. It's just these Wahhabism that's in the group. Don't get me wrong. Everyone have bad people. Yeah. Muslims, Christians, black, white, brown. It don't matter. Everyone have a bad apple. And that's what happened regarding that incident. So it's just about context, George. You've always been honest. So it's all about context.
It's a rather noxious contribution to make for the following reasons. You're right that some of the remnants did declare a fight. They declared an intention to struggle for the reunification of Syria and the overthrow of the Al-Qaeda government. That's true. And they killed, some say, 200 HTS members. But the people that they videoed, HTS videoed themselves murdering, were plainly not Assad remnant armed elements. I mean, you saw the videos, and I know that you saw the videos. If I saw them, you saw them. You saw the old men being murdered. You saw the young boys, unarmed, defenseless boys, begging for their lives, being murdered. You saw the farmers begging in the name of the Prophet Muhammad during Ramadan, saying, I've got kids, please have mercy. You saw them murdering the farmers. You saw them bursting into houses, massacring whole families, stealing their things. You saw them. Now, every regime which comes to power at the point of a bayonet, at the point of a gun, will experience some resistance. It doesn't look like much of a resistance to me, I've got to tell you. I'm not in any way going to predict that that resistance will succeed in overthrowing Jolani. But when you get that resistance, you don't go house to house murdering men, women and children. And for you to call them a bad apple, they're all bad apples. The entire Wahhabist, Takfiri, fanatic stream are all bad apples. And they were all involved in the murders. It wasn't one guy going around shouting the name of God before murdering an unarmed person, helpless in his captivity. You know that. I know that you know that. It wasn't one guy. Was Christopher in red car, but on Ukraine. Go ahead, Christopher.
Listen, I can't. I'm a comprehensively educated working class bloke. I feel angry, George, and I feel emotional. I feel as though I'm going to cry now just speaking. And you know, my father was murdered, and I rose above that anger towards my dad's killer. But I feel angry, George, and I'm struggling to overcome the anger that I feel towards the British political class and the British media, right? Because they are responsible for wreaking so much division in this country by spinning untruths, half-truths, lies, inaccuracies all the way down the line. I've had to educate myself over the course of my life through not having the education that I should have had. And people talk about this war as if it began in 2022, but they're not saying anything about 14,000 Russian-speaking or Russian people being killed between 2014 and 2022. If any country lost 14,000 of its people, what do you think the country that they were from would do? Of course, they would try and protect them. And yet these things are never put forward in the press. It's like the public are blindly following people like Keir Starmer. I was sat in the pub next door with all the lads playing pool drink, and they all think the same. Why are we getting involved with a war? Do you know what it is? I am going to cry now because I took a picture of a basket outside of a food bank with bread in it on Thursday morning, right? And this bloke was going through a pile of wet loaves of bread because poverty in my town is so bad, and yet Keir Starmer is committing billions of pounds to a war that just cannot be won. And it hurts me, George. And the lies and the deception and the deceit around it all, and progressive liberals clapping their hands and shouting and bawling, wanting to bring Donald Trump down when he's the one that wants peace. And it seems to me as though through all of this, through it all, it's as much about destabilising Donald Trump. The political class, the media class, progressive liberals are desperate to look for any way to destabilise and bring down Donald Trump, even though the man wants peace. And I'm a socialist. My granddad was a communist. You know, I've been on the left all my life. Donald Trump is about as far away from where I am politically as you could ever get. But I applaud him for standing up on the side of peace and right. And that's all I want to say, George.
Well, that's all there is to say, and you said it in a way that nobody else could. It's the best call of many a night. Your hatred and detestation of the British political class and the media class, and you're a man who forgave the guy who murdered his father. It's difficult to forgive our politicians because they're trying to murder everybody's son.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Now, I don't know how much of what I was saying you caught or what has been lost forever, but I apologize for it anyway. I want to go straight on with the show. Simon of Weaponized News is on the line on Sullivan and Iran. Let's hear it. Go ahead, Simon.
Greetings to you, Mr. Galloway, and to your worldwide audience. Well, as has so often been the case, we're seeing members of the Biden administration, after Victoria Nuland was made a full professor at Columbia University, more and more being dropped into highly prestigious posts at world-famous universities, for them to cool their heels, be it for 4 years or 8 years. And the latest one of those recipients winging his way to the same place that Jacinda Ardern, after her mismanagement of the medical intervention period, got not one fellowship but 2 fellowships at Harvard University. Biden's national security advisor, Jake Sullivan, has now been made a full professor at the Harvard Kennedy School of Governance, and it's his title that I'm sure even our most seasoned and skeptical audience members will be aghast at. His title is the inaugural Kissinger Professor of the Practice of Statecraft and world order. And he's going to be starting straight away, not even waiting for the next university year, on the 1st of April. So apparently he needed some income rather quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I did see that appointment. It is extraordinary, even by the revolving door standards of Western governments. I'm not sure how proud anyone would be to be the Kissinger Professor of Statecraft and World Order. Sounds distinctly Orwellian to me. Now, I was beginning to tell you about the podcast. We're in the top 20 in Poland. I know, right? UAE and Indonesia. Gayatri is very happy indeed at that. It's a really great listen, and I thoroughly recommend it to you. You can get the podcast by scanning the QR code on the screen now. And please leave a review and rate it. That helps us grow even further. Now, one of my favorite callers, all the way from Panama, is Donna, on the Kurds, the Turks, and the US. I told you, we are the global university of the airwaves. Go ahead, Donna.
Greetings, George, and the audience. Yes, I would love for you to address the issue of the Kurds. What do they want? Who are their real allies? That's one thing. The other thing is that you asked a question, what do the people, my fellow countrymen in the United States who suffered on 9/11, what do they think of the head choppers being in charge in Syria and the fact that the U.S. and with its allies basically spawned these head choppers? Well, let me just say honestly, and lest you think that I am an American hater, a self-hating American. No, not at all. That's not at all. I'm a truth teller. I look at things objectively, and if I see something wrong, I'm going to report it accurately, and I'm going to be as unbiased as possible. But I do know something about America. I was a professional ballet dancer, and I spent probably more than half my time from the age of about 12 through my professional dance career, focusing on the physical aspects of my life, in my training, and, somewhat on, music, things that kind of added to it. So but I also was always determined to read and to listen and to learn. And while I was in the dance world, I used to hear people remark to me, how do you know this? How do you know so much about this? Because other dancers were not interested in, foreign policy and history and things like that. They were pretty tired from working all day and focusing, mainly on their work, on their bodies, their injuries, their roles, and not so much on things that the quote unquote, general public focused on. Well, I have found since that now that I'm not a dancer anymore, people still say to me, how do you know this? How do you know this? How do you know this? And what I've learned is most Americans are incredibly ignorant. And I'm not talking about poor people who never had a chance to go beyond 12th grade. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about middle class, solidly middle class, even in some cases, upper middle class people. Now, it did not used to be this way. My parents were, as my sister and I were, products of public school. I know in the UK, the public is the private and private is public, but you know what I mean. Government schools. We happen to have great government schools. And they were very learned. They studied Latin. They studied French in high school. And nowadays, I don't know what they teach in the schools, but kids are and their parents are even worse. You couldn't even most of them could not point out Ukraine or Syria on a map.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the news that you were a professional ballet dancer puts into perspective the elegance of your contributions here on the mother of all talk shows. You have retained that elegance in your verbal communication skills. I've got to tell you, most British people couldn't point out Ukraine or Syria on the map either. This is a symptom of the Western decline, that our populations are invited to spend their money and send their sons to give their lives, they give their treasure in foreign causes and wars, when the people who are paying for it and voting for it couldn't even tell you what the issues were that had led to the war, and in many cases, far too many, couldn't even tell you where these people were. I mean, I saw an American interviewed, and when asked where Ukraine was, he pointed to Australia on the map. And so I wouldn't, in other words, beat up the American public uniquely for that. This is a common characteristic. And I tried on Sunday to make this point. I'll make it again. Last week, 4 million people watched MOATS. That's a truly astounding number of people. I mean, astounding. Go compare it with anybody other than Tucker Carlson, anybody else, anywhere in the world. But it's still a tiny number compared to the population even of the United Kingdom. Never mind the United States, never mind both of them together, never mind the two of them together plus South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and the rest of the English-speaking world, and never mind the rest of the non-English-speaking world. So we have to keep in perspective. We have more people who know more than we have ever had before. But we have a huge number of people who, I'm sorry to say, are mere sheep, who give their life's blood if necessary, who give their sustenance financially, and who bray when asked, and dutifully get on board the truck taking them to the abattoir. That is the long and the short of it. But it seems to me, given the unique horror of 9/11, the impact of 9/11 on the American psyche, that the very organization that the US government says carried out the 9/11 mass murder of thousands of American citizens is the same Al-Qaeda that American weapons, money, diplomatic cover, and endless propaganda was used to put into power in Damascus. Now, as a contradiction, that is as sharp as it's possible to get as a contradiction. And we must do more to proselytize for that. Donna, thank you as always. My comments on Syria tonight. Bishara Saraf said, so sad. Syria is the most beautiful Arab country where everyone once coexisted under a secure regime, now destroyed by the stupid West for the sake of Israel. And Ardavan Goharju says, so whatever happened to those who rejoiced when Assad went? Quote, I only emerged after dark. For the UK to give any kind of support to HTS is unsupportable. These responsible should be hounded out of office. I'm doing my best. Scott is in Massachusetts on the same subject, that of Syria. Go ahead, Scott.
I just wanted to ask you, has there been any UN activity about sending in peacekeepers? I know that Putin and Trump are going to get together and send people in, but a lot of people are going to die before they get there. And I'll let you back in a minute, Scott. I was about to ask Simon from Weaponized News what happened at the closed door session of the Security Council
on Monday of this week on this very subject, but the line seemed to die and he disappeared, so I didn't get that chance. So I don't actually know, because it was a closed door session, and I have not seen any reportage of that session at all anywhere. But I do know that it's on the agenda for the telephone talks between Trump and Putin on Friday. Back to you, Scott. Please complete your point.
Well, I know that he's probably dead. I had a roommate in college that lived in Damascus, and his family supported the Ba'ath Party and Assad, so he's probably not living now. But it's a shame. They're such nice people, very nice people, and to let Al-Qaeda and ISIS run wild is just wrong, absolutely wrong. And sometimes politics takes too long when something like this happens. And I can only say that I hope they fall soon.
Powerful point, Scott. I don't expect them to fall soon. I think that the country is no more. It very greatly pains me to say that. As I said earlier, 2 of my sons are half Syrian, and I love Syria very much indeed. But the Syria that we knew is gone, and I suspect gone forever. It is now multiple countries, multiple entities at least. Kurdish entity, a Turkish entity, an Al-Qaeda, ISIS entity in Idlib, an Israeli entity in the Quneitra and in other provinces that they have now seized and will never give back. The poor, benighted population of what we might call central Syria, including the coast that we've been talking about tonight, will, I think, for some time at least be ruled by these fanatic head choppers. And therefore, if Putin and Trump come up with a plan tomorrow to begin airlifting people out of Syria from that airbase and take them to asylum in the United States and elsewhere, I, for one, will support that. It's very painful for me to say that. I wish I could dream of a return to normalcy in Syria, where Syrians of all faiths, confessions, and even ethnicities lived as Syrian Arabs together. I wish, but I can't. And so if the solution is the rescue of the Christian and other minority populations and their resettlement elsewhere, rather than live under Al-Qaeda rule for the foreseeable future, I could not, in all conscience, oppose that. I know some will criticize me for what I have just said, but I could not, in all conscience, say to the Christians in Malula, you have to stay in Syria, even if it means that you get your throat cut and you get crucified. I could not say to the Alawites in Tartus, in Latakia, that you must stay in Syria, when I know that these people will never rest until they have massacred every last one of them. And Scott, you have no idea how hard that was for me to say. Look, a big shout out to our donors tonight, our top donors who've been on the MOATS.tv website since I came on air: Teresa Trout, Ashraf Muhammad, Nicola Marshall, Dakota Saunders, and Jane Liddell. Thank you so very, very much. As I keep saying, please go to the MOATS.tv website, click on the donate button and stay there to watch my interview with Scott Ritter. Let me close the poll prematurely because of the Scott Ritter interview that we're going to do. 97, 91, 91 and 93 think the West is responsible for the HTS murders of Syrian Christians. Marwa is in London on Syria again. Go ahead, Marwa.
Yeah, good evening.
Go ahead.
Yes, I am Marwa. 2 of my brothers are killed 2 days ago in Syria. because by the jihadists of Jolani. This is genocide against Alawites in Syria and ethnic cleansing. All that because they are Alawi, and my brothers are completely civilians. They don't have any weapons. And now what is happening? Jolani is making investigating committee. We don't trust in this committee. Syrian coast don't trust in this committee, and what I want to deliver the voice of my people in Syrian coast. They ask international protection. They ask an international committee. They don't trust in Jolani government. And we
nobody in their right mind would trust Jolani so-called government. No one in their right mind would trust a committee set up by Al-Qaeda to investigate Al-Qaeda atrocities. Nobody in their right mind would give that any credibility whatsoever. So either the call tomorrow on Friday with the Americans and the Russians has got to provide peacekeeping for safe havens in Syria, but the problem with that, as Syrian Girl pointed out earlier in the show, is that the minorities are scattered everywhere. They are not only on the coast, they are in Damascus, they are in Aleppo, they are throughout the country. Why wouldn't they be? Because Syria was a country where everyone was free to live, irrespective of their faith, irrespective of their ethnicity. But either the people will have to be protected where they are, or they'll have to be rescued some other way. I'm deeply sorry, Marwa, on the loss of your two brothers just yesterday. How fresh a wound must that be for you? And the whole audience, I'm sure, joins me in sending you our condolences, and that of to all of those who have lost people in the last week or so. Let me take a quick break, then I'm going to Gayatri, who's elsewhere with the social media news roundup, then a couple of calls, and then it will be time for the Scott Ritter interview. Stay tuned, you don't want to miss it.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special announcement. A big thank you to all our wonderful listeners, as the Mother of All Talk Shows podcast is now one of the most listened to political podcasts in the entire world. We are the #1 English-speaking political podcast in the Middle East, and in the last year alone have charted in the top 10 in podcast land in Pakistan, Russia, and China. Like, rate, and subscribe to the MOATS podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts to be a part of the fastest rising independent news show in the world.
You are listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows with George Galloway.
Now, just to reiterate, in about 10 minutes, you should relocate from YouTube to any of the other platforms on which we are broadcasting, X being the main one, Rumble, and so on. But the best place for you to go to watch the interview with Scott Ritter, which you definitely will not want to miss, is MOATS.tv. Let me squeeze in one more call before Gayatri. Gareth is in Cardiff. Go ahead, Gareth.
First of all, George, good evening. Thanks for having me on.
Welcome.
No problem. Second to that, I wanted to give my own condolences to lovely Marwa that was just on with you for the loss of her two brothers.
Very harrowing.
Very harrowing,
yeah.
A brave young lady, and I wish her well in life moving forward. But Marwa's experience, ultimately for me, her family experience, the loss of her two brothers there in Syria, for me, all feeds right back to what the Zionist entity in Palestine is doing with its scheming and its genociding beyond the borders of historic Palestine. And it feeds back to what we get up to here in the UK. Keir Starmer, as our so-called Prime Minister and head of government, all he's endeavouring to do to bolster his own position in life, which is failing by the second, as you've testified and evidenced, is he's behaving like a little Englander. He's still living in the past, as if Britain governed a quarter of the globe. And he's doing what he can, I would say, to have as much influence as possible abroad, because domestically his government's failing left, right and centre. He's got very little to cling on to hold on to power and authority. And he's funding a genocide in Palestine, perhaps not directly, but certainly with military assistance and intelligence assistance out of Cyprus, with the RAF and the like. And he's directly now throwing millions of pounds down the drain of valuable British taxpayers' money to a war that we stand no chance whatsoever in winning. The sooner that the British and perhaps the English public wake up, and I speak as a Welshman, to how these people are living in the past and get rid, the sooner the better. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, I agree with the great majority of the things that you said, particularly on the British government, the performance of the British government on the national interest of the British people, on the state of the British economy, on the state of British society, state of British crime, the state of all of the once cherished institutions in Britain is so lamentable. It's almost difficult to believe that one man could have achieved all that in not even 9 months that he has been in office. There is no doubt at all that his strutting around like Mussolini on the world stage is entirely predicated, as Mussolini's was, on the backing of somebody else's army. Now, for a brief moment, I thought that somebody else's army, the American army, was not intending to show up, and that Starmer's histrionics, and that's what they are, were therefore hollow and empty. But I don't believe that as much today as I believed it last week, because Donald Trump may well have put the American army right back in the center of the events in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine, and that will do America no good. It will do the world no good and places us all in very grave danger. The only caveat I'd make to what you said, and again, it's a very painful one to make. It's absolutely true that Israel supported the ISIS al-Qaeda insurrection against the government in Damascus. Absolutely, incontestably true. Their senior officials have all testified to it. The video exists of them treating al-Qaeda wounded in field hospitals in the Golan Heights, which is Israeli-occupied territory. That's incontestably true. It is also incontestably true that it suits Israel for the Syrians to be tearing each other apart. It is equally incontestably true that the United States, Britain, and all Western countries all played a despicable role in bringing about the triumph of the head choppers to power just a few months ago in Damascus. All of that is indisputably true. But sometimes that is used as an excuse to avoid the fact that the people who were actually slaughtering unarmed women, children, old men over the last few days were neither Israeli nor American nor British. They were Muslims, They were Arabs, despite the effort that was made earlier to paint them all as mercenaries from Central Asia. Sure, there are plenty of those. Thousands of Uyghurs and Uzbeks and Tajiks and so on, thousands of them. But the people I saw videoing themselves, murdering innocent, unarmed captives, women, children, and old men, were all Arab, and they were all Arab Muslims, and they were declaring proudly that they were committing these atrocities during Ramadan in the name of God. And I can't let anyone, as it were, appear to gloss over that uncomfortable fact. Let me ask Gayatri if she's linked up with me in her studio for the social media roundup. She is. What's rattling, Gayatri?
Well, what's rattling indeed? What's rattling is we've got a battle of hypocrisies going on in which former president of the Philippines, Duterte, comes home into Manila at the airport, gets basically kidnapped and flown into The Hague based on ICC warrants, whilst Netanyahu is jet-setting around the world with multiple ICC warrants above his head. What's happening is that Zelensky ran out of his tenure as president of Ukraine last year, so long ago. So he's parading this war circus based on martial law, whilst in Romania, the front runner is being banned from standing. By the way, he is for peace between Russia and Ukraine. Do you think that has something to do with it? And also...
well, maybe.
Exactly. And then we have the wanted terrorist with a bounty of $100,000 on his head ruling the beautiful Syrian Arab Republic today, resulting in the haunt and the massacre of minorities, as you said, during Ramadan. It's the battle. Who wins? It's really hard to compare and contrast.
Yeah.
So
it's a Himalayan mountain range of hypocrisy. It's not just Mount Everest of hypocrisies. It is a full Himalaya of hypocrisies. The only thing that troubles me is that so many people can't see it. Or some people see one mountain but deny the existence of the other mountain. And you know what I'm talking about. In my own family, I've got people who completely understand that the media and the politicians are all lying about Gaza, but they're miraculously telling the truth about the Ukraine. I'm astounded by it.
So you have that in your circles, I have it in my circles, and they're arguing in regards to Syria that, yeah, but we have to give him a chance, and Assad was really bad. Well, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, isn't it? So I'm glad to say that in response to the poll, is the West responsible for HTS murders of Syria's Christians? On your Patreon, it's 100% yes. They're all on board. Zone Walker says the West attacked Assad for over a decade and then groomed his replacement. So obviously, yes, is the case. And then Gary Master says, question to Madeleine Albright, was the death of 500,000 Iraqi children worth it? And she replied, yes. Question to Hillary Clinton, was the Libyan overthrow of Gaddafi worth it? She laughed and she said, we came, we saw, and he died, and she laughed. We all remember that evil, devilish laughter that she portrayed live on TV. And you wonder why we are in the mess we're in today. And Paul Brown continues saying, just as the West was responsible for ransacking Libya and then handed it over to Al-Qaeda and other Islamist mafioso, which of course led directly to the Manchester bombing. And this is of course one very close to our heart, because on the day we went to the Manchester town hall to register our daughter's birth, was the day of the Manchester bombing.
Yes, alas. And we were a mile away when the bomb exploded, and we heard it very clearly indeed. Well, I can't take you for chips, and I can't let you go on because I've got a call from Washington on Egypt, and then it's me with Scott Ritter. Thanks, Gayatri. Mimi is in Washington on Egypt. How about that? Go ahead, Mimi.
Hello, George, Gayatri, and everybody. Thanks for taking my call. I really just wanted to ask you about, because I'm trying to follow everything politically, and I don't know about other leaders and all. And I would just want to say out loud for the one caller, I'm sorry I forgot her name, but for her brothers that passed, I'm so very sorry. God bless you and your family. And I want to know, what does, because I've had some family members travel to Cairo and, Christian family members there, like, where is this line? Like, also, they've been to Turkey as well. Like, is the whole plan, like, with the whole Trump-Israel thing, like, just take it all down and like, where, like, is everybody at risk in the Middle East? Like, specifically, like, where does Egypt's leader, and I'm sorry, I know I'm not trying to be ignorant, but also, where does he stand with, like, all, like, I can't believe this is all being allowed, but I specifically want to know, like, about Egypt, like, with, Syria and the guy that's, like, slaughtering people in Syria. I mean, are they just going to take over Syria? Are they going to, and I guess it's just like the money tree.
Yeah, the people who took over Syria would very much like to take over Egypt, and they have their echo in Egypt, and they have it throughout the Arab world. They have it actually throughout the Muslim world and throughout Muslims in the Christian world. There are people, I could name them, that are the echoes of the Takfiri fanatic Al-Qaeda mentality. They exist in my country, they exist in your country, they exist around the world, and they exist in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, they exist in many parts of the Muslim world, and they exist for sure in all Arab countries. The problem is that the government of Egypt is itself entirely illegitimate. It came to power, overthrowing its predecessor, murdering the elected president in prison, effectively murdering him. He died in court, but he was effectively murdered as a political prisoner. The general who took over in Egypt took off his uniform, put on a suit, and called himself a president rather than a general. And the rulers of the Arab world, whether puppet presidents or corrupt kings, are all, to a lesser or greater degree, mainly greater, themselves completely illegitimate. So you have a battle between two entirely illegitimate forces. The Takfiri Islamist fanatic extremists and the bad and the worse of the puppet presidents and the corrupt kings. And people like you and me, we don't have a horse to back in that contest. The only idea that can unite all the people of the Arab world, from Marrakesh to Bahrain, the only thing that can unite all the religions, all the confessions, that can unite all the ethnicities within that gigantic area is the idea of Arab unity, of one Arab nation, of many colors, many creeds, one Arab nation from the Atlantic to the Gulf, acting as Arabs first, not as this kind of that and that kind of this religion or sect or ethnicity. The only umbrella, the only overarching idea that can possibly work and relieve everybody from this endless slaughter is the idea of Sha'ab Arabi Wahad. 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 One Arab people. One. 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 Thanks, Mimi. Now, this is where the YouTube stream, I'm afraid, has to end. But the show goes on because the one and only Scott Ritter, former Marine Corps intelligence officer and United Nations weapons inspector, is inexplicably banned from our channel. So we have to terminate the stream only on YouTube right now. But don't worry, you've got a few seconds, if you haven't already done so, to search for the show on Rumble, on X, on Instagram, on Facebook, on TikTok. So hurry though, as the show continues right now. But for those of you who are still watching me on YouTube, I'll say goodnight to you now.